This is the Nikon ZF, and if you were only to buy one photo camera for every different style of photography, this might be the best one you could buy, especially under $2,000. Now, this ZF has been on loan to me from Nikon for like a year and a half now, and I do actually have to finally send it back at the end of this month, which is very, very sad. But that being said, I've used this just a ton in every different environment possible in the last year and a half or so. And one of the things I've been really into lately, probably just because I'm getting old, is watches. I recently just picked up this Rolex Explorer for my 40th birthday. And I was thinking a lot about that, the concept of like one watch collection. One of the reasons I've wanted this watch for 15 years is that it's so versatile. It can be dressed up, it can be dressed down. I can wear this every day probably for the rest of my life, and it would be great. And as I was thinking through my cameras and things, they're all so kind of like compartmentalized into different sections, which really make a lot of sense for each of the cameras. But I was thinking, and I realized that the ZF kind of is that like one camera collection. So for the next bit, I'm going to be kind of exploring why this actually might be a perfect photo camera. What I do often in these videos, regardless of the price, is hit up the price. And for the price, this thing is fantastic. You're getting this and well under $2,000. I've seen them go on the used market for like under $1,500. Not only is it inexpensive, but it's also a full professional camera. I say that because it has great specs. It has a 24 megapixel sensor, which is kind of like the bare minimum for like a pro level camera nowadays, but it has it. It also has really good continuous tracking autofocus, which again puts it in a pro tier. It uses a high capacity battery, so I'm not worried about shoving a bunch of tiny little batteries into here all day. And I think the biggest thing that it does, especially for the price, is it has dual card slots. It's giving you those dual card slots in kind of a weird way, but it's still there, and I'm still gonna give it a pass for having dual card slots. It has a regular single SD card slot, and it also has a micro SD card slot, which is very, very odd. I don't see other cameras doing this, but I think a lot of other cameras should do this. So I've used it in professional environments. I've done wedding style images with it, and there has been no point in which I have felt like this camera is not up to snuff in terms of a professional camera. This could be your main wedding photography or portrait or whatever camera, and you would be just fine. The second bit, in which I think that a lot of people are kind of gravitating towards this as well for, is the idea that it can be a personal camera. So I think the funny thing is it's actually still a pretty big camera. Like it's not going to be as small as like a Leica, and it's definitely going to be significantly bigger than like an X100 VI, especially once you're adding a lens to it. It's like kind of a chunky camera, but there's just something I think about the retro design and the overall vibes of it. It's also not very heavy. So it's one of those things where, and I think this is just like a stylistic aesthetic preference. When I see this camera on a table or I see it just with me, I want to pick this up. And that is in a different realm than most other cameras. Most other cameras that I want to pick up are my Leicas or like the Hasselblad. The Fujifilm is the rare camera that's also in that like, oh, I want to grab that camera as I go out the door and make some images with it or document my kid's birthday party or going to the park or something like that. I think because it has that very film-like retro aesthetic, it gives me that same feeling despite the fact that it's still kind of big and bulky. Like it's still around the same size as like the Panasonic Lumix S5 II or any of my Sony cameras. But because of that retro styling, it does make me want to pick it up and use it. And thus it hits that perfect spot of like being a professional grade camera, but also I want to pick it up and use it. Now, another reason why this works really well as a personal camera is because they've made lenses specifically for this. Not that other companies haven't either, but they've made specifically this 40mm f2, which is a really, really good kind of walk around lens. I know that when the Leica Q343 first got announced at, whatever, $7,000 or whatever that thing is now, 75, I don't know. It's a lot of money. I kind of just posted sort of in jest that like, this camera is about the same size and gives you the same focal length and the thing for, I think, just over $2,000. So obviously, while you're not getting Leica quality out of this lens or this camera, the sensor is different, all sorts of stuff. Most of us are going to be able to justify like $2,000 a lot easier than they can justify $7,000 or $8,000. Now, one of my personal favorite things about this camera in general is also the adaptability. There's a reason why I just did a video on my Leica M11, and I have all of these lenses out on the table. A big part of that is just how much I love to use all of the different lenses and the different things that go on with the Leica M system. Like M-mount lenses are really, really great. And one of the amazing things about the Nikon Z mount, or Z mount for you Canadians and English people and stuff, is it's huge. Like, look at how big that mount is. And because of that, there are a lot of really cool things you can do. I've made a video specifically on this TechArt adapter. It is the TZM02. I can put the link to this down in the description. But one of the things that you can do is adapt all of these different Leica M mount lenses. So do I want to use a Light Lens Lab vintage Summicron style lens? Sure. Now I have this lens. I can use it in its manual focus mode. I can just turn the adapter off and use this really tiny, really cool little setup. Or I can put this thing to infinity, turn on the adapter, and now I have autofocus that also gives me tracking and continuous autofocus, and it's just wild how good it is. It's not like perfect, but I have made really, really good images and tracked people really, really well with this crazy lens. And all of these lenses, to be frank, like the adapter just works really, really well. And even for that alone, if you have a bunch of M-mount lenses or vintage lenses in general, it's almost worth buying this just to use them on. I don't know why the adapter works so much better on Nikon than it does on Sony or any other of the mounts, but so far, until this is updated, and if it does get updated, let me know. But I've just heard so much more about how this works so much better on Nikon than it does on the other ones. And I can absolutely confirm that this adapter and whole setup is really, really fun to use. And I have had just a lot of fun with this. Now, the other thing about that, and I think that one of the things that people haven't really messed with a lot or haven't thought through, is the fact that I have a bunch of old Nikon F lenses. So this is the Nikkor 24mm f2.8. This was my dad's. He got it in the 70s. And I've used it on my Nikon F2 a ton. It's made a lot of really, really great images for me. But I can also buy a Nikon F to Leica M adapter, put that on there, and then put this within the Leica M to Nikon Z adapter. And now, I mean, it's not small, but now I have a legacy lens for me. It's something I'm never going to sell. So now I have an autofocus 24mm or whatever lens that is giving me similar kind of like vintage characteristics and things for super cheap. It's a really easy way to build out a lens lineup. You can obviously do that in the Leica M system and make your stuff a little bit smaller even, but there's just endless possibilities with adapting, and adapting just works so well on the Nikon ZF and just the Z mount in general. On top of that, I made a video specifically kind of like reviewing and checking out their 35 and 50 1.4 lenses, but these are also fantastic. So if you don't want to go watch that video, you don't have to, but it's up here if you want to check it out. But these lenses are also just about the perfect size for this. I wish they were a tiny bit smaller, but even without a grip, I can definitely use the 35 and the 50. And they are the perfect mix of being inexpensive, but also sharp enough, but also having some character. And you're getting them Uh, Again, under $1,000 by a long shot, and you're getting native lenses that track really well and do all the things that Nikon does. And so if you do want to kind of expand beyond just some of these small little personal things, they have a bunch of really good lens options that you can add to this. So overall, I mean, I legitimately think that the Nikon ZF is, again, not like a perfect camera. It doesn't do everything the best, but for that combination of like doing portraits, doing personal stuff, doing weddings, I think it does all of those at a very, very excellent level. Plus, it is maybe the most adaptable personal camera you can get. There are so many options between all the manual focus glass you can get, adding the autofocus adapter that just opens up the possibilities so much more than so many other cameras. And honestly, I obviously don't own this camera and I do have to send it back to Nikon, sadly, but it's one of those things where if I had to pare everything down to like a single camera to do all the photo stuff that I like to do between personal work and doing weddings and having autofocus and relying on things, but also being able to adapt fun lenses and get good character and all that kind of stuff. Honestly, I think this camera is where it's at. And the fact that it is so inexpensive relative to everything else that are on the market, I think that's where this thing just absolutely wins. So if you've made it this far and you haven't subscribed, please consider doing so. I've definitely been trying to make my way to 100,000 and I would really appreciate the support. If you haven't checked out my original ZF video, you can check it out up here. Check out my video on the Tech Art adapter up here, and I'll see you in one of those videos.